So, Death Note. What did I feel? Was it good? Was it worth it? Well, we're gonna get into it. And since this is a pretty short series, I'm gonna cover every single episode in as much depth as I can realistically give, so stay tuned. It's an anime series based upon a manga of the same name. It focuses on the character of Light, a Japanese teenager who is the top of his class. One day, he is given a notebook that gives him the ability to kill people, just by looking at their face and knowing their name. In the first episode, we meet the Shinigamis, a group of higher beings who love to cause trouble. Ryuk drops his death note, the one that Light finds later. He at first does not believe it is real, but after testing on the hostage taker and sees the results, he realizes it is. After writing down several more names, he gets visited by Ryuk. If I saw a demon, I would certainly freak out, but Light was not surprised. After talking to him briefly, Ryuk reveals that Light written down more names than anyone else, and also tells him he is no longer able to go to either heaven or hell. He then tells Ryuk about his plans to become a god. Well, you can't go to God? I guess you might as well become him. Now, I personally would have liked to have seen a little more build-up, but hey, it's exciting to get to the next part. Now, one thing that established in this episode was that the writer of Death Note can control the manner in which someone dies. But if nothing is put down, then they die of a heart attack. Due to the killings, many of the followers have called him Kira. Light's actions have brought the attention of the International Police Institution, and at the headway of this was a mysterious figure named L. His name, face, and voice are hidden. He's shown to be incredibly smart, and deduced that Kira is likely based out of Japan. He decides to goat Light on live TV, shows his face, and confronts Light. Light takes the bait and kills L. However, it turns out it was not L, and instead a death row inmate. Well, damn, if I was going to die anyway, might as well be put to use. L correctly deduced that Kira was going to snap as bait. It shows one of Light's fatal flaws, that he wants to boast himself up and loves to brag. In the next episode, L discusses the Kira case and deduces that due to the timing of the killings, Light is very likely a student. There's one detail I did not mention at first, but Light was only able to write names in Death Note during a specific time to avoid suspicion. Wouldn't want to get caught with something like that. L asks for data on how criminals' names were published. We also learn that Light's father is the man in charge of the Kira case. This gives Light the ability to monitor the police force. Oh shit, keep your enemies close. One day when Light is heading home, Ryuk tells him that he's being followed. He then tells him that in exchange for half his life, he can have the Shinigami eyes. This allows him to see the name and lifespan of anyone just by looking at them. Light tells Ryuk that he is trying to create an ideal world. No criminals are left unpunished, and that as god of that world, he cannot sacrifice half his life for the Shinigami eyes. Yeah, makes sense. If I can't go to heaven and see God, I'm gonna become a god and create heaven. Light begins experimenting, trying to find out how much control he has over how a criminal dies. Using this knowledge, Light devises a plan to find out who has been following. He makes a drug deal to hijack a bus on which Light, and by extension, his follower, are passengers. During the hijacking, Light manipulates his tracker to feel that the man following him is Ray Pember, an FBI agent from the United States who is working with L. And here is something I have to bring up. I don't know if anyone has been to Japan, but it'd be very hard for a white person to blend in. I don't know if he's meant to be Asian, but I honestly just can't tell. And there's always a recurring problem in most anime I've watched. It's not normally a problem, but when you have characters from different ethnicities, it can be really confusing trying to tell who is who. Light waits 1 week before killing Ray Pember. He follows him onto a train, and after threatening his family, he forced him to write down the names of fellow FBI agents. I guess he isn't going after his criminals anymore. The paper that he forced him to write on was a paper from the Death Note. In doing this, he causes simultaneously deaths of 12 of the FBI agents. The police are scared to continue investigating, and the American president pulls the FBI out of the Kira case. However, Pember's fiancée, whose name I cannot pronounce, was later established to be a formerly skilled FBI agent, and she decides she wants to go after Kira for revenge. Now, damn, is this starting to get out of hand. Now, the Japanese police, who look just like the Americans, were previously unaware that they were FBI agents in Japan. It is concluded that L hired them to investigate the Japanese police and their families. This causes them to distrust L. The chief announces that because of the heightened stakes of the case, any officer that no longer wishes to work on the Kira investigation may leave and will not be demoted for doing so. Only 5 officers remain on this case. In an effort to repair the relations with the Japanese police, L meets in secret, and with the remaining detectives, he actually shows his face. L reveals that his thoughts about Kira and how he might be following the murders of the FBI agents. He pinpoints who the FBI agents were and who they were tracking during that period. Meanwhile, Light meets a woman who introduces himself and he later learns is Ray Pember's fiance. He learns that she has come to her own theory and has worked out that Kira can kill by other means than heart attacks. This information is pretty damning and would open up the investigation even wider. Light, knowing that he cannot let this information get out, decides to coattail this woman and begins talking with her, trying to get her to open up. Although they have a quick game of cat and mouse, where eventually Light is able to figure out her real name and puts it down in the death note. Now this is one of the few scenes I actually have to show you because there's no way I could do it justice just by talking about it.
Yes, of course. I just need to see some form of identification before we proceed.
Oh,
Yes?
you see the name I gave you earlier, well, it wasn't actually my real name. I'm so sorry.
Don't worry, it's alright. To be honest, I'm impressed by how incredibly thorough you've been. You've stayed one step ahead of me. But I suppose that's just further proof of your capabilities.
So will a Japanese driver's license do the trick then?
Sure. I made it in time.
So, if you don't mind my asking, why do you keep checking your watch?
Oh, well... I guess it's because I'm Kira.
After the fiance's disappearance, Elle looks at the short list of people who were being tracked by the FBI at the time of his death. He requests a RAND squad be installed in their homes of all those he suspects, including Light. Light, however, is aware of this, and has to relocate all the cameras in this room. This leads to one of the best scenes in the whole show, where while Elle is watching Light, he hides a small TV and a bag of potato chips so he can still continue to kill criminals without being seen or without being suspected. This is honestly such a great scene, and not even a single punch was thrown. The tension, as you want to see whether Light's going to succeed or Elle is going to catch him, is just off the charts, as two of the smartest people play a game of cat and mouse. Elle's suspicions are momentarily subdued, but he does not discard the possibility that Light may be Kira, and decides to meet him in person. They first see each other at college entrance exams, where Light notices a mysterious and eccentric student sitting behind him. He was also staring at him, by the way. He introduced himself at the graduation ceremony as Hideki Ryuga, the name of a famous idol. Light is shocked when Hideki Ryuga reveals himself as Elle. I remember seeing this first time and thought that was the stupidest thing to do, because now Light just knows who to find and who to take out. But as you go and learn more of it, you realize that it'd be very suspicious for Elle to just die right after meeting Light, and he decides to befriend him and gather more information to try to find out his true identity, and kill him later. This episode really ramped up my stakes, and my investment in the series just went off the charts. I cannot wait to see where this was heading, and was even more excited about this game between the two. A bit to profile Light's behavior, Elle challenges him to a game of tennis. However, this game of tennis is not simply just about tennis. It is cat and mouse, where Elle watches Light's behavior, trying to see if he would give him any hints about him being Kira, and Light's doing his best to not give him away. After Light wins the tennis game, Elle asks him some questions regarding the Kira case, and invites him to help in the investigation. The two then receive news that Light's father has had a heart attack and is in the hospital. At first I thought someone had written his name down Death Note, but I don't think that Light would do that. It later turns out that it was just a normal heart attack, due to the stress of the Kira case. Light promises his father they'll make sure he's caught and executed for making him suffer. On the way out, Elle confronts and scrutinizes Light, still uncertain whether or not he's Kira. Light attempts to bluff and demands to be placed in a prison cell without television for a month to prove his innocence. Elle is satisfied, but is curious as to why Light should offer that proposal. Meanwhile, the television station Sakura TV receives an audio tape from an anonymous person claiming to be Kira. And now, we're going to get some more interesting things happening. Now we know Light did not send the tapes, so it begs the question, who did? In order to prevent Kira from gaining support from the broadcasting of these tapes, Elle decides that the broadcast must be stopped. One of the investigators rushes down to the station, but mysteriously dies from a heart attack. They realize that Kira no longer needs to know a person's name to kill them, and panic sets in. Light, who is not responsible for the tapes or the person's death, decides to involve himself even further in order to gain more intelligence on Elle. Meanwhile, Elle suspects that the person behind the broadcast must be a different Kira than the one they are chasing. At the end of the episode, a young girl named Misa is seen discussing her admiration for Kira with a Shinigami named Rem. She reveals that she has made the trade for the Shinigami eyes. When I started this, I knew this had to pay off, and that's a new interesting thing, because now there is a way that Kira is going to be able to find out Elle's identity. In the next episode, Elle decides to test Light's analytical skills. Elle has him listen to recordings and see what conclusion he comes to. Light knows that these are a fake Kira, but he doesn't want to overplay his hand. However, he decides to tell him about the second Kira and his theory. He ends up coming to the same conclusion as Light, and Elle then comes to the conclusion that Light cannot be Kira. The team then broadcasts a recording made by Elle and Light to trick the second Kira into replying. Misa unwittingly reveals important details about the property of Death Note and Shinigami when she responds, and this begins to put Light in panic. She's a wild card and is nowhere near as smart or as calculated as Light. At this point, the only thing truly preventing Elle from figuring out about Kira's identity is the fact that he doesn't know anything about the Shinigami or the Death Note. In a reply, Misa demands that the first Kira meet her in person. Shocked and wanting to pursue the lead, the investigation team formulates a plan. While Light decides what to do, meanwhile, Rem explains to Misa how to kill a Shinigami. In order to kill them, you have to make them fall in love with a human and put a name in the Death Note out of love. Rem tells Misa the story of a Shinigami who obsessively watched over Misa from the Shinigami room. One night, a deranged stalker threatened to kill both Misa and himself. He wrote his name down in Death Note, ending his own life and adding the remainder of his lifespan to Misa's. This is Chekhov's gun and will likely be coming back. She has already thrown a wrench into Light's plans, and I'm really excited to see where this is going. The detective and Light volunteered to go to Aoyama in order to investigate a date mentioned in the journal. Light intends to find out who the second Kira is. In order to keep his identity unknown to the Shinigami that is following Misa, he gets a group of friends to surround him while they walk. Possessing the Shinigami eyes, however, Misa finds out who Light Yagami is, because he is the only person whose lifespan she cannot see. Oh, now this is getting interesting. This is going to be important later, so we gotta see where this is going to lead. Later, Misa confirms to the investigation team that she has found the real Kira. The team decides to change their approach and try to reason with her. They release a television broadcast, condemning Kira as a heartless murderer who would kill anyone who discovers his identity. Furthermore, they offer to lessen the severity of punishment for the second Kira if they reveal the information they know about Kira. Misa ignores this, finds Light, and explains that she tracked him down because she loves him. Oh, now things are really starting to shift away from Light. And I really have a feeling that this is going to be important in his demise. After Light introduces Misa to Ryu, the two discuss their plans to get rid of Elle. Taking advantage of the situation and of Misa's love for him, Light concludes that he can use her to mislead Elle while furthering his plans for a better world. Misa's Shinigami, Rem, however, threatens to write down Light's name in her own Death Note if Misa's safety is compromised. Whoa. Now that's going to be an interesting thing, because Light is always someone who likes to take advantage of people, but if he can't do that and his own life is at risk, I don't think he's going to be willing to do that. In the meantime, Elle is thrown off the trail by second Kira and is confused by new audio tapes, purposely denouncing the police's attempt to make the first Kira appear as a pariah. It concludes that two Kiras have met and are working together. The nets are closing in on Light, and I can't wait to see where this is going to lead. Worried at the prospect that he might be murdered, and is convinced the two Kiras have met, Elle demands that in the event of his death, Light should be arrested. Later, Light and Elle meet each other outside college. Much to the anger and frustration of Light, Misa appears and convenes with the two. Minutes after Misa leaves, I received news from Elle that she's been arrested on the grounds of being the second Kira. Wow, the walls are closing in and things are getting really interesting. Misa appears blindfolded and tied to a chair. Well, good thing this came out before 50 Shades of Grey or, yeah. Well, guess it didn't matter. Elle instructs one of the detectives to torture her in order to obtain information. Damn, I mean, she is the second Kira, but it seems a little extreme. A few days later, Misa relinquishes ownership of Death Note, thus erasing her memories of its existence. Before she relinquished it, Ren lifted her hair, which I will notice on the camera. This episode is really taking things to a whole new level, and the stakes have finally been raised. Damn, I cannot wait to see how this goes. Light decides to tell L that he thinks he may be Kira subconsciously, and wishes to be confined. Light's father also believes it's a good idea, but that he should be confined as well, as he cannot risk his emotions getting the better of him in this investigation. Damn, this seems like a bad idea to me, but who would I know, I'm just a dumb stoner. While Light is in prison, the Kira execution stops, and L becomes more suspicious. Light chooses this time to get rid of Death Note, which will also get rid of his memories. This change in behavior puzzles L. Light goes from being completely calm to desperate. The Kira executions then resume, and a new set of killings confuses L. Wow, things have really gotten going. In a last-ditch attempt to determine if Light and Misa were two Kiras, L and one of the other detectives stage a stunt in which Light's father attempts to kill Light and then himself does shame. Holy shit, what a way to go out. However, it turns out this was simply a ruse. Seeing Light and Misa's reaction to it, L intervenes and announces they are no longer suspects for being Kira. Although he is suspicious over the fact that Misa's DNA was found on audio tapes, Misa's released, but Light continues work on the Kira case. L and one of the detectives move the investigations team to a new building inside the city. Elsewhere, Rem speaks to a mysterious businessman about Death Note. 8 businessmen then plan the next murder Kira will commit in order to further the Yotsuba group's interest. Wow, seems like we have another Kira now. I honestly think that this would have been a good place to end the series without the businessmen, with neither Light nor L winning, but I think there's still some potential with the story. L proposed that he be tied to Light, causing a scuffle to break out in their headquarters. It is some time until the new Kira's killings begin, which has L and Light thinking that Kira may be killing for monetary profit. The suspicions lead them to Yotsuba Group, a rich organization that dominates the gold markets. Kira is also reported to have been sending threats to politicians, and the investigation team is forced to conduct their operation in secret. As far as the public is concerned, their investigation remains unsolved and the team is disbanded. At this point, L brings in 2 new members into this investigation, Iber and Weddy. These 2 are criminals that have yet to be caught, so this is really going to be interesting. Now, one of the detectives decides to snoop around the Yotsuba Group and do his own research. This never goes well. He finds evidence that Kira is in the building, but before he can act, he is apprehended by the 8 businessmen. He uses a fake identity card he was given earlier and pretends to be Misa's manager. He pretends to offer a deal involving her in the commercial campaign, while contacting L using his modified belt buckle. Following his instructions, he then fakes his own death. And honestly, out of everything in this series, this was the one thing which I didn't buy. I don't know what it is, but in the 21st century, it's nearly impossible to fake your own death. In one of the group's later meetings, one of its members chooses to leave, out of fear he may face the consequences of Kira's actions. Well dang, Death Note has fallen into the wrong hands, and whew, blood is going to be spilled. Now the investigation team installs wiretaps and surveillance cameras in order to monitor the Yotsuba Group. However, they are amazed by how openly they discuss their use of Kira. Well, now I know how they were able to fake some death, because these dudes are retards. Light and L come up with the plan to get one of the members of the group to act as a spy and help postpone the killings of Kira. L reveals that he still suspects Light is the first Kira by playing mind games with him. Damn, my brain would have forgotten all this whole situation a long time ago, but, you know, that's just a side effect of things. Afterward, L questions Misa and wants her to infiltrate the Yotsuba Group to obtain information. They worry that even if they got enough information, the group will make it difficult to capture all of its members at the same time. Kira sets his eyes on Misa after meeting her. While Misa is taking a break from meeting with the Yotsuba Group, Rem contacts her. Misa is able to see the Shinigami, but her memories of being the second Kira do not return. Upon touching a portion of the Death Note that Rem brought her, Rem tells Misa about everything that's happened and that she must trust Light. Upon re-entering the room, she spots who the third Kira must be. Misa goes on a date with him and is able to obtain proof that he is the criminal Elle is looking for. However, her ease in which she determined it is very suspicious, since he himself cannot deduce it. After learning who the third Kira is, Elle decides that police must not apprehend him until they learn about his killing method. He points out that this will be an advantage in curing society and proving that he's been caught. He arranges for Secure TV to air a special on the Kira case, where Matsuba, the detective who was caught, will declare he knows the identity of Kira in order to lure him out. Well, you gotta risk it for the biscuit, but how do you know he doesn't have the eyes? Having been granted immunity from prosecution, several of the businessmen trick him into following L's plan. As Third Kira races to the television station, determined to kill whoever the whistleblower is, L and the investigation team watches every move via cameras and wiretaps. While driving to the TV station, he talks with Rem about the situation. L, Light, and Misa watch the investigation team, wondering who he is talking to. L wonders if he is talking to a Shinigami. Rem convinces him to go to the station, but he has his own selfish motives for doing so. He enters the station's offices and writes the man's fake name in the death note. Well, who could have seen that coming? They think he has just written a note to himself because they don't know anything about the death note. However, his subsequent erratic behavior they find odd. L argues that he attempted to use his killing method. He then makes a deal with Rem to get the Shinigami eyes. Furious pursuit ensures when L realizes he can kill after looking at his person's face and orders the police to apprehend him. Well, it's a good thing you didn't have that before. The Third Kira is arrested on the grounds of being the Third Kira and causing multiple murders in that region. After inspecting the death note, L discovers that the Shinigami do exist. Well, that's pretty damn important, I'd imagine. While L is stunned, Light takes the death note from him and remembers that he's the original Kira. Light then kills the Third Kira by writing his name on a scrap of the death note. It is revealed that Light gave away his death note and had a fake rule, saying that having written the book, its owner must continue to use it once every 13 days or perish. The investigation team reviews the rules written in the book and finds that they can do little to get rid of it. Meanwhile, Light orders Misa to recover the original death note he had, hidden a few months earlier. Misa makes a second deal with Ryuk for the Shinigami eyes in order to find out L's true identity. L asks Rem about the death notes, but she reveals as little as possible in order to avoid implicating Light and Misa. Meanwhile, Misa begins to use her death note to kill criminals. Although Light denies Misa's involvement, L becomes very suspicious of her, and Rem realizes that this was Light's plan all along, to endanger Misa, so Rem would sacrifice herself to kill L. Later, L finds himself on the roof of the investigation team headquarters. He laments how distant he is from other people, and how very likely this is going to be over. When the two of them rejoin the rest team, L reveals he's planning on testing the 13-day rule, the only thing currently absolving Misa. However, before he can do so, Rem kills L, at the cost of her own life. After snatching away Rem's death note, Light celebrates his victory in silence. Well, damn, I did not see it happen. I guess L lost and Light won. Well, there's still about 10 more episodes or so there's obviously more to see here. The first half of the episode features L narrating the events of the first 25 episodes. The account of the Kira case is revealed to have been left behind by L as a record of his achievements as a detective. It is deleted by Light when he discovers it. The investigation team appoints L's successors and agrees not to publicly announce L's death. Light resumes his executions with a vengeance, killing the two criminals and remaining Yotsuba group members. The show jumps ahead 5 years, depicting Light joining the National Police Agency of Japan in 2012 at the age of 23. 5 years earlier, shortly after L's death, L's computer is shown to have automatically notified an elderly man of his death. The man then later reveals the information to two children. So, we have his new successors. An orphanage caretaker informs L's successors, Mello and Nier, that L has died. Relinquishing the opportunity to succeed L, Mello leaves the orphanage to pursue Kira on his own, backed by the American Mafia. Well, those are some pretty powerful people. They were able to kill a sitting president. Oh, wait. Someone's at the door. FBI, open up! Oh, what I meant to say was they have no connection to any president whatsoever. Nier allies himself with the President of the United States, along with Steve Mason of the FBI. He informs an organization whose goal is to catch Kira, the Special Provision for Kira, SPK. Mello abducts the director of the NPA and demands a death note under Light's task force possession as ransom. As soon as Light discovers this, he kills the director. Mello then decides to kidnap Light's sister, and while scrambling away to get her back, the investigation team receives a phone call from Nier, who reveals that he knows of L's death and that someone has attempted to replace him. Oh well, since we're going to have another L, Nier suggests that he and Light cooperate in order to rescue his sister. The death note gets taken in exchange by the kidnappers in Los Angeles. But Mello's men hijack the plane when he's on the drop-off in the middle of the desert. Light monitors his father via satellite until he enters an underground facility. There, they exchange a death note for his sister. Mello slaughters most of SPK once he obtains a death note. Nier then proposes to Light that the two cooperate completely in the future, and shares his suspicion that Mello is playing a game to see who can catch Kira faster. Meanwhile, in the Shinigami realm, a Shinigami named Sido tells another that he lost his death note. Justin informs him that it was stolen by Ryuk and dropped in the human world. Oh, well, that might be a bit of an issue. Light uses the death note to have a member of the Mello's Mafia mail him the address of their hideout. Sido sees the address and goes to find Mello, revealing him that the 13-day rule is fake. Meanwhile, Light informs Ryuk that he will give up ownership of Death Note and borrow Misa's. The next day, Misa, posing as Kira, calls the investigation team to tell them that she will give them her Death Note. She also tells them that most members of Mello's Mafia will die on November 10th, and that will be the best time to find the stolen Death Note. Upon receiving the second Death Note, Soichiro makes the deal with Ryuk to obtain the Shinigami Eyes. The investigation team storms Mello's facility on the set date. Soichiro comes face to face with Mello and reads his true name, Michael Keel. Before he can write it on the recently recovered Death Note, however, he is shot. Mello escapes by detonating explosives, and Soichiro, Light's father, is taken to hospital, where he dies, completed by the knowledge that his son cannot be Kira because he can see Light's lifespan. Well, at least that's a good way to go out. Light returns a lost Death Note to him. The President of the United States declares America's neutrality regarding the Kira and Sakura TV's program, Kira's Kingdom. Well, damn, you got the most powerful people in the world begging on their knees. Meanwhile, a scared Mello uses SPK agent as a hostage to gain entrance into Nier's headquarters and meet with him. Mello wants a picture Nier has of him so he remains safe from Kira. In return, he tells Nier about the Shinigami and that some of the Death Note rules are fake. Already suspicious of Light, Nier proposes to the investigation team that they test the 13-day rule. None of them believe that they should. In response to Nier's actions, Light contacts the President of the United States, asking for information on the whereabouts of the SPK and threatening to kill him if he does not cooperate. Well, he should be clearing out a few people. Later, the host of Sakura's TV goes to America as Kira's messenger and gives a worldwide broadcast inciting people to break into the newly found headquarters of the supposedly evil SPK. Well, we already know something about people. They are sure to react to this in a calm and rational way. Kira's followers are commanded to break into SPK headquarters in New York. While Misa watches the scene on television, waiting to kill Nier as soon as he exits the building, well, I was wrong. Nier asks the Japanese investigation team to consider that Light may be Kira. He and the remaining SPK members escape the building by dropping buckets of money out on the windows to distract protesters. People would never go against their values for something as trivial as money. Worked. Aware that his team is being to doubt his identity, Light emails Misa with a new plan. Meanwhile, Aizawa offers Nier information about the past investigation that leads Nier to conclude that Light is Kira. Aizawa then tells Light that he would like to resume surveillance on Misa and him to help clear his names. Light does not object. One of the guys appears on television soon after, asking Kira's followers to donate money to build a temple and worship of him. Something tells me he is going to die. Disgusted, Light has the new owner of the Death Note, whom Light selected based on his appearances in Kira Kingdom, kill him. Back at the investigation team headquarters, Aizawa realizes that with both Light and Misa under observation, the new killings cannot be attributed to either one of them. Tragic events in Teru Mikami's childhood convince him that God wants him to stand up to evil. As a result, when criminals everywhere begin to die, Mikami believes that he is God's righteous judgment and becomes a frequent guest on Kira's kingdom. After Light gives him a Death Note, Mikami becomes ecstatic and passes judgment on criminals in Light's stead. He chooses a new spokesperson for Kira, Kirio Takada, who happens to be one of Light's girlfriends in college. Light realizes that he can use his connection to his advantage and sets up a meeting with her, presumably for the benefit of the investigation. While the two meet, Takada receives a call from Mikami, and Light reveals himself to Mikami as Kira. Well, women never do anything rash or emotional. They create a ploy to force investigation team to remove all bugs in the room. After which, Light tells Takada that he wants her to be his goddess in the new world. Light tells the investigation team that they will pretend to be Takada's boyfriend to catch Kira. Elsewhere, Mello watches Misa, suspecting her to be the second Kira. Nier goes to Japan in order to bait out Kira. Light silently accepts the challenge. Nier ponders on how to beat Light, knowing two things. One, that one person has the Shinigami eyes, and two, that they communicate via Takada. Following Light's instructions, Takada asks Mikami to send her 5 pages of the Death Note. She tells him that she will continue his work in a fake book, made to look like the real one. While walking to a broadcast, Misa runs into Takada, and the two have a brief confrontation. Halle Linder, who has been sent by Nier to act as Takada's bodyguard, stops her then, but Takada meets with Misa for girl talk soon after. Well, this never goes wrong. Linder sits in with them. By the end of the conversation, Taka is convinced that Misa is stupid, and Linder reports to Nier that the love trial between Light, Takada, and Misa. Elsewhere, the SPK member Steven Giovanni confirmed that Mikami is the new Kira, after watching him kill a man by writing something in a notebook. After the report, Nier decides that they must get close to Mikami, but carefully so that the Shinigami trailing her will not harm him. Meanwhile, Aizawa marks several notepads before Light and Takada meet, to determine whether or not they are communicating in secret. Takada tells Light of her meeting with Misa. Oh, well, this couldn't possibly backfire. Annoyed at the trouble both women cause him, Light assures her that she's the only one for him. He then writes a script for Takada and makes it sound like she has agreed to help capture Kira. After meeting, Aizawa's suspicions are confirmed. The SPK picks up Misa then, and when Light contacts Nier to tell him that they have lost contact with her, Nier informs him that he has her. Meanwhile, Giovanni searches Mikami's locker and finds the notebook. Well, that's pretty damning. During a second visit, Giovanni takes photographs of the names written on it. Nier determines that the handwriting is Mikami's. Not having everything he needs, Nier sets his plan into motion. Well, let's see if this ends better than L's. Mello, with Elba's accomplice Matt, kidnaps Takada in an operation, getting in the way of both Nier and Light's plan to set up a meeting between the SPK and the investigation team. Matt is shot by Takada's bodyguard, and Takada, prepared to face death, kills Mello by writing his name in a piece of the Death Note she managed to hide away. Oh, well that escalated quickly. Once Light hears about this, he uses a piece of the Death Note to make her commit suicide by setting fire to everything around her, including all evidence. Well, that was one way to go out. Each having developed a strategy to bring the other down for good, Light and Nier finally meet face to face in an abandoned warehouse. Light brings out Mikami, who have him write the names of everyone but Light on his Death Note. Meanwhile, Nier is confident that the pages of the notebook Mikami is using are fake, revealing that he tampered with them. All they need to do now is wait to see whose name was not written to find out who the real Kira is. Light struggles to mask his glee, as he thinks he already knew what Nier's actions were. He had Takada keep the real Death Note while switching Mikami's with a false one. As they wait for the powers of the Death Note to take effect, Light declares his victory. Well, I guess he beat 2 great detectives. Mikami's Death Note fails to work. Nier reveals that he knew about the fake notebook and actually tampered with the real one. Mikami is restrained, and faced with Nier's undeniable evidence, Light breaks down and laughs like a madman. And this was a truly awesome scene. He confesses that he is Kira and attempts to write names down on a piece of Death Note hidden in his watch. Matsu stops him by shooting him down. Seeing Light writhe on the floor in agony, Mikami kills himself, causing a commotion that allows Light to flee the warehouse. However, Light's wounds do not allow him to travel far, and Ryuk, as he promised in the beginning of the series, writes down Light's name in the Death Note. Light has a cardiac arrest, seeing Light's figure in front of him as he passes away. Now I have mixed feelings with the series. It was rushed in the beginning and drawn out in the end. The battle of wits between Light and L was what made people really love the story and both characters. There was never going to be a perfect ending that could satisfy everyone, but there are plenty of places I felt like the story could have ended, and I think that they did not choose the best option. Light had to lose, but the decision to kill L was a major roadblock. Ed never had the same connection, and the rivalry was nowhere near as interesting. It felt like an artificial extension. However, despite all of that, it is still a great series, and I'd recommend everyone to give it at least one watch. Now, I've got some work to do, so please leave me alone. Well,